City approves 36-month Shelter Safety Action Plan. Welcome to Regent TV. Today we bring you a major update from City Hall on efforts to enhance safety across Toronto's shelter system. At the November 26th meeting of the Economic and Community Development Committee, chaired by Councillor Alejandra Bravo, the City approved the Shelter Safety Action Plan. This 36-month initiative aims to tackle systemic challenges while prioritizing the safety and well-being of both shelter staff and clients. Key measures include $13.9 million to extend the Canadian Red Cross refugee lodging contract until December 2025, $8.1 million to expand community safety team services provided by One Community Solutions. For neighborhoods like Regent Park, home to diverse communities including refugees and asylum seekers, this plan represents a vital step towards fostering dignity, safety, and inclusion for all. Stay tuned for a closer look at the initiatives and its impact on our local communities.
The next item is EC 17.4 Shelter Safety Action Plan and contrast amendments related to lodging for asylum seekers and refugees and community safety team services, and we have a presentation. Welcome to Gord Tanner, General Manager of Toronto Shelter Services and Supports Division, and all right. Sorry about that. Someone had their device on speaker and was broadcasting something in the committee room. Welcome, Gordon. Maybe you can introduce Joseph.
You bet. Good morning, committee members. Chair Bravo, Gord Tanner here, as you say, General Manager of Toronto Shelter and Support Services, and I'm joined here by Joseph Stalteri, who's our Director of Strategic Programs. And we're here to provide you a brief presentation on the report we have before you at committee today. So we were asked to report back on the development of a shelter safety action plan in response to a study done by the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health, which we presented to this committee in April of this year. In addition to presenting the Shelter Safety Action Plan, this report seeks council authority to implement a new tracking tool for incidents of anti-Black racism, provides an update on our work to enhance harm reduction and overdose prevention, as well as mental health case management support for people living outdoors, seeks authority to amend 3 contracts, 2 for community safety teams and 1 for the Canadian Red Cross. And finally, we're seeking authority to reimburse churches and community organizations that supported our refugee response in the summer of 2023. So some background. We approached CAMH in 2021 about the growing number of behavioral incidents that we were experiencing in the shelter system. And they partnered with us on a 2-year study which examined factors that contribute to physical and psychological safety in shelters for staff and service users. The final report proposed 22 recommendations to improve safety and was received by this committee in April of this year. Over the course of the summer, we worked to develop a shelter safety action plan informed by the CAMH recommendations and developed consultation with shelter providers, shelter workers, people with lived experience, the Housing Rights Advisory Committee, and a roundtable with mental health service providers and other city partners. The people we talked with validated the recommendations from the CAMH study, and key themes from these meetings indicated that staff need additional adequate training on providing trauma-informed care. We need to enhance our ability to respond to crises and to de-escalate situations. We need more supports for our shelter staff and outreach workers, and we need greater access to mobile mental health supports. The Shelter Safety Action Plan we propose includes 14 actions to be undertaken over the next 36 months in 3 key areas: supports for staff safety, supports for client safety, and improving system-wide oversight on safety. So actions to advance staff safety include Continuing measures to protect the physical and psychological well-being of our staff, and particularly our Indigenous, Black, racialized, and 2S LGBTQ+ staff. To review and strengthen the training for all of our staff included targeted training that includes supporting clients who use methamphetamines. And to support the implementation of key actions and the city's ongoing commitment to confront anti-Black racism, we are seeking authority to embed a notification tool in our shelter management information system and launch a new reporting tool to document and track staff experiences of anti-Black racism in the workplace. This slide shows you the current number of workplace violence incidents in shelters since early 2022. And in tracking this data and based on a number of initiatives that are underway, I'm happy to report that these incidents have dropped by about 38%. We'll continue to track these as we implement our shelter safety action plan. So actions to advance client safety include facilitating and expanding access to health and harm reduction services, developing specialized programming to support people with extensive histories of violence or service restrictions, and to prioritize them for supportive housing. Initiatives we have underway in this area include our substance use and overdose prevention programming in some of our larger shelter sites, and continuing to work with partners to deliver low barrier mental health and primary care to people living outdoors. This slide shows you also the current number of service restrictions occurring in Toronto shelters. So as you can see, the number has dropped considerably, about 49% since 2021, and it's been trending down with the trending down of reported workplace violence incidents. The final area of focus are actions to improve system-wide oversight on safety. And here we will be developing further guidance for the sector on the use and consistency of service restrictions to strengthen the process for people to access information if they do have service restrictions, and monitor the new behavioral risk alert system, which increases information sharing about safety issues across the shelter sector. Initiatives currently underway include implementing the Homelessness Services Capital Infrastructure Strategy to make new physical shelter infrastructure accessible, safer, and better aligned to meet the needs of our staff and diverse clients. Furthering the development of community safety teams or the deployment of those teams to support larger shelter locations and encampments. So I'll end it there, and I look forward to any questions you may have on the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We may very well have questions, but we're going to go to speakers now. Thanks for the presentation. The first speaker is Samantha Di Bologna. Is Samantha online? Oh, hi. Oh, hi, Samantha. Welcome to committee, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Councillor Bravo. Good morning. My name is Samantha Di Bologna, and I'm the Manager of Policy at Maytree, a charitable foundation focused on advancing systemic solutions to poverty through a human rights-based approach. I'm here to discuss the Shelter Safety Action Plan, a plan that has the potential to improve the conditions of the city shelter system for both residents and the staff who support these critical services. While the current plan is more of a high-level overview of the changes we can expect in the coming months, we're pleased to see some of its broad areas of action. These include better supporting staff, creating safe and accessible spaces for people who use substances, exploring how to link and support people to housing and other supports, and importantly, reviewing and improving the use of service restrictions in shelters. These actions can help to address some of the discrimination that people may face, and hopefully will prevent the forced eviction of people who often need the deepest levels of support. We're also pleased to see that the city engaged with people with lived experience of the system in the plan's development. However, the CAMH shelter safety study that was used to inform this plan also pointed to challenges with several city policies that so far aren't addressed. These are policies that limit autonomy and privacy for residents, such as those that limit access to secure storage for belongings. The city should take care to ensure that the important information collected from the CAMH study on city policies and through other engagements about how people are experiencing the system are reviewed in further iterations of the plan. But taking a rights-based approach will also mean more than examining procedures alone. It will mean reviewing the built environment of the shelter system, mechanisms for feedback, and the objectives and targets to monitor the plan's success. In terms of the condition of the city shelters, the CAMH Shelter Safety Study noted that overcrowding was a significant issue. While some of the plan's recommendations could help with this over time, there's a need to address how well shelters are meeting resident needs now, especially in the winter months. The city can also consider how to improve accommodations for people with disabilities, informed by the city's audits of shelter accessibility. In addition, while we're glad to see that there is a plan to improve the complaint resolution process, it will be important to ensure that this takes a people-centered approach. This is one that empowers residents to know and exercise their rights, free from retaliation, and in terms of building trust as well. This is something that you will have heard from the Housing Rights Advisories Committee's feedback. In addition, people with lived experience of the shelter system need to be continuously engaged, not just in the development, but as it's implemented. And lastly, to ensure the plan's success, there needs to be clear objectives, monitoring tools, and roles and responsibilities for city staff. While we support approving this plan, there are opportunities to further ground it in a rights-based approach as it's implemented. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the deputant? No? Thanks very much for being here today. The next speaker is Callum Houston, or Houston? Callum? Is Callum here online? Not at present. The next speaker is Edward Pereira from Toronto Shelter Network. Edward is online. Edward, welcome to committee. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. My name is Edward Pereira, and I'm TSN's project coordinator for the Pipeline Project. The Toronto Shelter Network represents more than 34 organizations that collectively deliver Toronto's 24-hour homelessness services. TSN is deputing to express our support for the recommendations brought forward in the Shelter Safety Action Plan. Toronto's shelter system has been faced with tremendous pressure since the pandemic began. Over 12,000 people are currently in shelters and bridging programs. There are over 200 encampments, and over 230 callers to central intake are not matched with beds. Many shelter hotels have closed, including the Delta Hotel, a 400-bed shelter hotel that stopped taking admissions this month. Over 6,000 people are refugee claimants. Supervised consumption sites are anticipated to close at the end of March 2025. There is overcrowding in shelters, insufficient mental health and harm reduction supports, NIMBYism for new and existing projects, and an urgent need for safe, adequate, affordable, and supportive housing and better income supports. Toronto Shelter and Support Services requested access to TSN 6-sector table meetings, plus an all-member meeting to represent the CAMH report and ask for input from our member agencies. There was also a full session with the representatives of the Shelter and Housing Advisory Committee. It was clear from these sessions that there is a need for consistency and follow-up regarding service restrictions within organizations and across the sector, as interpretations vary wildly. Standards for accountability, transparency, service delivery, and treatment in the application of service restrictions needs to be developed using a trauma-informed, human rights, anti-oppression, and anti-racism approach with a focus on restorative justice. More focus needs to be placed on the physical and psychological safety of Black staff and clients who endure racism daily. Staff training is key, and there is also a need for more specialized supports for those with many service restrictions. Funding disparities result in service inconsistencies. Mental health and harm reduction supports need to be available in every shelter. TSSS are addressing this now over a multi-year plan, but increased funding could accelerate this timeline. Other physical, recreational, and social programming is also important and will create safer environments for both staff and clients. The Government of Ontario must recognize that supervised consumption sites are crucial to the well-being of those with substance use issues and should be a part of the system, which includes treatment at the new homelessness and addiction recovery treatment centers. TSN urges the Economic and Community Development Committee to adopt the recommendations of the General Manager of the Toronto Shelter and Support Services the Executive Director of the Housing Secretariat, and the Chief Procurement Officer, and approve the recommendations of EC 17.4. I'd like to thank the Madam Chair and the committee members for this opportunity to speak.
Okay. Thank you very much. Are there any questions of the deputant? No, thank you for coming to committee today. We now have Callum Houston, who is online, and we'd like to welcome Callum to committee. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'll make it brief, since much of what I was going to say has already been reiterated. The report outlining city commitments to improve shelter safety for staff and shelter residents. It also includes some specific measures to increase safety for residents who use drugs, recognizing that they face many risks in shelter settings, such as violence, drug poisoning, stigma, and discrimination from even the staff themselves. But there is still some of this positioning is, some of the positioning towards people who use drugs, it's still problematic, especially when it comes to shelter safety and violence. The report points to programming that staff say has worked well in areas for improvement in harm reduction and overdose prevention in large shelter hotels, including all sorts of other community like safety teams, encampment, reimbursing Black-led churches. There's a lot of good things in there, but the city does need to recognize of this impending emergency and the deadly impact that it will have on the unhoused community. Also, I advocate that you guys stand up to the province, publicly oppose policies and approaches that have evidence shows actually will harm people or make it harder for them to secure permanent housing. And to continue to deliver evidence-based supports within the shelter system. I think that's very much key to improving people's conditions. That's pretty much everything. Like I said, I wanted to keep it brief.
Thank you, Callum. Any questions for the deputant? Seeing none, thank you. Next up is Savannah Wilson, Toronto Alliance to End Homelessness. Are you here? Okay, 3 minutes. Oops,
Thank you, Councillor. My name is Savannah Wilson. I'm with the Toronto Alliance to End Homelessness Network.
Can you hold for a second, please?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah, you may continue. Thank you.
I'm with the Toronto Alliance to End Homelessness, a network of over 100 partners across the city united in a vision of ending homelessness. I want to commend the city's initiative to engage CAMH to do the shelter safety study. And this safety plan is an excellent first step towards a more just, inclusive, and safe shelter system for everyone. It's iterative, it's thoughtful, it's a phased approach that supports sustainable and realistic improvements, and it sets the foundation for long-term success. I think that the move away from punitive measures such as service restrictions, which do little to improve safety and only move individuals who commit harm further to the margins, is an excellent and encouraging part of this plan. And the focus on staff safety, trauma-informed training, crisis intervention and de-escalation skills will reduce reliance on police involvement in emergency services, and the psychological health and well-being strategy ensure that staff have the supports and tools that they need to manage their own experiences in the shelter system. I do want to point to a couple of pieces of feedback. One is on the proposed exploration of a pilot to focus on centralized case management models. This is a really encouraging and welcome proposal. However, I do think that it's important to recognize that Pilots exist and they must be implemented and scaled. So to that point, I want to uplift the work of the Beyond Housing pilot, which was a collaborative project between TAH, the MAP Center for Urban Health Solutions, Dixon Hall, and Loft Community Services. This pilot provided care conferencing, long-term case management, and continuity of care support for residents in hotel shelters. Early evaluations show a clear need for centralized care models, particularly for clients who frequently move around the system. And we're now working with the Coordinated Access team to identify opportunities to scale that up. I want to quickly point to a piece of concern that I have around the behavioral risk alert safety system. While the plan to implement reporting tools to improve tracking of harm in the system is important, it does not address or prevent harm or violence. Studies from MAP Center for Urban Health Solution and the Homeless Hub highlight the risks of a behavioral alert system. Flagging individuals as risky can lead to discrimination, further marginalization, especially if the system fails to account for the nuanced context of their behavior. Over-surveillance can also erode privacy, foster distrust, and increase disengagement from services. To that end, it's neither effective in addressing the root causes of harm in the system, like the lack of mental health care and increasingly volatile and unpredictable substance use support systems, and a lack of deeply affordable and supportive housing options. These are central to both the Shelter Safety Plan and the Homelessness Services Capital Infrastructure Strategy, and more transparent implementation of the monitoring of that system could mitigate the risk of the system undermining the very goals of the safety plan itself.
Thank you very much. I know that you rushed to finish, but do you have any other, comments that you weren't able to make?
I think I'm very pleased to see restorative justice named in this report. I would like to invite and encourage the exploration into restorative justice models to also include moving beyond restorative justice towards transformative justice. It promotes collective responsibility and is a tool to build and change systems to prevent harm rather than just respond to it.
Thank you. Any other questions of the deputant? No. Seeing none, we'll go to the next speaker, Justine Neda Arisa. Is Justine online? Welcome, Justine Neda Arisa. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, good morning. Thank you to the Economic and Community Development Committee for allowing me to speak today. My name is Justine Neda Arisa. I'm a healthcare provider, community member, constituent of the city in Ward 9, and a former shelter worker. I'm here to speak in support of the Shelter Housing Justice Network demands and echo the many of the comments that have been said before me. Many of the recommendations outlined in this Shelter Safety Action Plan fail to address the shelter condition that inherently contribute to a lack of safety for service users and contribute to medicalizing, pathologizing, dehumanizing unhoused people who are accessing support. Much of what constituents safety focuses especially on staff safety and decontextualizes these conditions from the current escalating housing emergency across the city. A response to safety that does not adequately consider unsafe, inhumane, and punitive conditions that exist within the shelter system will fail to offer meaningful solutions for unhoused people and staff working in these environments. I work within a team that provides outreach and primary care to unsheltered Torontonians. As a team outreach worker, I support many community members with housing applications, system navigation, accompaniment to support in hospital visits. I ensure they're still connected to registered nurses and a family physician for medical treatment and interventions, often trying to also seek shelter for the folks that we support. I refer to them for additional services that are imperative to their health while they remain outside. Our team is often called to places such as emergency departments, general medicine wings, and ICUs to meet clients in hopes to continue care. Most of our clients get discharged from the hospitals to the streets, often medically stable on paper, but left to keep wounds clean and continue follow-up care in settings that are not fit for such purposes, such as tents, alleyways, parks, bus shelters. Healing without a home or a shelter is near impossible. We're often faced with the torturous effort to seek shelter for folks who desperately want inside, but are rarely successful due to the lack of shelter capacity. When and if folks access shelter supports, the conditions of the congregate settings ensure the spread of contagious diseases and a lack of privacy and rest, patronizing rules like curfew, no decision-making, little autonomy, no privacy, inability to lock one's door, and more shelters are using security. While working in shelters, it became clear to me that there is no security of tenure, where the power imbalance between shelter staff and residents can result in people being discharged or banned from indoor spaces when there is actually nowhere to go. In winter, in this weather, this is a death sentence. And house people are left with no options and the impossible choice of entering a system of control and punishment, of staying outside where they risk severe injury, being criminalized, harassed, or freezing to death once discharged or relocated. Above all, people living outside face extreme weather, including cold rain, freezing temperatures in winter. This increases the severe injury and deaths in the winter when people do not have access to safe indoor spaces. We're often left to respond to these crises with few to no responses of what is deemed safe. It's imperative that we acknowledge that workers in shelters and supportive housing systems are often precariously housed and predominantly marginalized people put in impossible
Hi, sorry,
positions.
you're at time, so can you please wrap up?
Yep. Throughout the years of doing shelter work, I learned that the approach of navigating drug use amidst a toxic drug supply is waved off by staff without emergency. I
Thank
really
you.
believe that.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask you to say, was there any other concluding comments that you weren't able to make? Go ahead.
Yeah, safe shelter and housing justice for everybody.
Thank you very much. Any other questions of the deputant? Seeing none, we'll go to Joshua Feldman. Joshua Feldman. Oh, here you are. Welcome to committee. You have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay? Is this all right?
Yeah,
okay, thanks.
very well.
My name is Josh Feldman, and I'm here representing Health Providers Against Poverty. In response to community advocacy from diverse groups, including people with lived experience of homelessness, outreach and community workers, as well as healthcare providers, the City of Toronto has improved winter access to shelter and respite centres. We commend these efforts. However, these changes are insufficient to keep people struggling to live in the city safe and housed. By the City of Toronto's own admission, these increases will fall unacceptably short. The city's 2024-2025 winter plan states the number of people in need of shelter and housing in Toronto has continued to grow due to inadequate income supports, lack of affordable housing, increased cost of living, and additional refugee claimant arrivals. While additional shelter space, warming centers, and new housing will help many in need this winter, seasonal plans cannot fully address the increasing demand for shelter. Instead of devoting appropriate funding to ensure we have sufficient number of safe spaces for people experiencing disadvantage, Mayor Olivia Chow increased the Toronto Police Services budget by $20 million. Decreased social services and supports push people further to the margins, scrambling to find shelter wherever they can. When people can't access safe shelter in the cold of winter, unhoused people will instead go to our city's hospitals, libraries, restaurants, and TTC stations. Investments in outreach are ineffective without safe and accessible spaces for unhoused people to come indoors during all seasons of the year. As healthcare professionals and trainees, we support the Shelter, Justice, and Housing Network in calling for the Economic and Community Development Committee to, 1, ensure the safety and well-being of people living outside by immediately opening any available city-owned space to act as low-barrier, year-round, 24-hour respite centers, utilizing vacant storefronts and community centers with surge capacity for extreme weather conditions. The need for adequate shelter is year-round, not only when temperatures reach -5 degrees Celsius, including and especially in conditions of extreme heat and poor air quality. Implement a moratorium on shelter bans and encampment evictions. Immediately end the surveillance, harassment, and displacement of unhoused residents and the destruction of their survival gear. Divest from and detask policing and continue to invest in improved access to safe shelter and housing. Immediately cease the closure of shelter hotels and immediately open at least 3,000 additional non-congregate shelter spaces. And ensure safe and accessible spaces are available for marginalized people with unique needs. So that's section 1. Section 2 is meaningfully improve the conditions of city shelters by ensuring city-run facilities meet Toronto shelter standards, including ensuring infection control measures, dignified conditions, adequate accessible showers and bathrooms, proper sleep services, access to appropriate food and meals, and adequate distancing between beds to promote safer conditions. 3, respect the rights of shelter workers by ensuring staff have the resources and tools they need to perform their work and build relationships effectively, including wages and compensation, benefits and supportive conditions, and appropriate training, including anti-oppressive and trauma-informed de-escalation training, and we're happy to see this in the proposed plan today. 4, guarantee the rights and well-being of people with disabilities.
Please.
By engaging in meaningful consultation with physically disabled unhoused service users to conduct an accessibility audit, ensuring that shelters and respite centers are physically accessible and follow principles of universal design, and finally ensuring people with disabilities have access to accessible shelters and respites.
Thank you very much. Any questions of the deputant? So that is the end of our list. Councillor
Can we just vary the list? I think a couple of people tried to get on, didn't hear that it was closed. How many attempted that?
So would you like to ask if we can vary the procedure?
Yes,
and,
please, yeah.
all in favor?
We dropped somebody, so if there's somebody else there, let's just do that.
Okay, the committee will allow for on this item to vary the procedure. Is there anyone here who was trying to get on the list and wasn't able to? Go ahead and then please register, say your name, and then we'll register you with the clerk.
Yeah, I think I'm done.
Not you, you've already heard from you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, Councillor. Bruce Davis. I'm with a company called Public Progress, and we work with municipalities and nonprofit agencies across the entire housing predicament, from emergency housing, respite sites, shelters, through to affordable housing, supportive housing, transitional housing. I don't have a lot of time, but I just wanted to, first of all, thank you. Recommendation 4, supporting the churches and ethnocultural organizations that have come forward and supported. I was here actually a year ago, and I tried to make the case that it was better to fund those groups at $50 a night than it was to spend $250 a night. So I wanted to thank you for that. I noticed the money goes to December 31st, and hopefully there'll be an ongoing program. The second thing, the real reason why I wanted to step up is recommendation 9 from the CAMH report seems to have fallen through the cracks. And when it gets cold, and when you're turning people away every night, there's a temptation to say, just put the beds a little closer together. There's a temptation to say, you can accommodate 100, well now you can accommodate 105. And I think part of the issue that compounds the safety issue is when people are desperate, anxious, hungry, scared, and we tell them to sleep 1 foot closer to the person beside them. The reason I wanted to raise this is because I believe personally we need 20 more shelters, and we need dozens more rapid housing sites. So I hope that the issue of overcrowding is not overlooked. And I know your staff come to you every year with the capital plan, which is very, very good, and I support it. But the whole issue last year when we faced this, and staff said, just move the beds a little closer together. I think that compounds your safety issue, and I'm concerned about it. So those are the only 2 things that I wanted to raise. You're super busy. I really appreciate the work that you're doing. I personally believe every village in Toronto has 35 villages. Every village in Toronto should have its own shelter. I believe community members who live there should support it and champion it, and they should volunteer to help out. We've created this weird world where people are fighting these. It's asinine. We need people to volunteer. We need people to come and do a little Christmas party. We need people to come in and run trivia nights. We need people from the neighborhood to embrace these facilities.
Please wrap up.
That's where I'm going with this. I think our shelters would be a hell of a lot safer, better for everyone if we could get the community involved. And thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any questions of the deputant? I have a question. You've described a situation in which every village within the city would have a shelter and where people would be welcoming. In your experience, despite opposition at the beginning and fears at the beginning, have you seen a situation in which a community has arrived at that, or have you seen a situation in which a community just decided to consider that people who are unhoused are part of other neighbors?
Councillor, I was involved with the opening of 4 respite sites. This is in 2016. Liberty Village was one of them. I remember we took the mayor, then mayor, on a visit of the respite site at Liberty Village. We were just setting it up, and there were a bunch of people in the corner decorating a tree and bringing in all kinds of gifts, and the mayor at the time said to me, "Who are these folks?" And I said, "Those are people from adjacent buildings in Liberty Village, from the condo associations, who came in to set up a Christmas tree, and they're bringing gifts." And the mayor at the time said, "I thought people were fighting this." I said, "No, absolutely not. People want this to be successful." Another one at 541 Lakeshore, which is the old building on Lakeshore. It's been repurposed as a respite site. I remember we got neighbors from the condo associations to come in and do a trivia night, to come in and do a dance. This is back a few years ago, but it is absolutely possible. And I think, frankly, shelter operators and the city, when they operate these, they need to build in that community component rather than setting up a moat. You don't want to set up a moat around these things. You want the neighbors in helping. And frankly, you want folks who are in the shelter in the community doing good things and going to church and participating. So I think we should think of these shelters as an asset. And the community should want them to be successful.
Thank you. Any other questions? Any other people here wishing to speak on this item as we've opened it up? Nope. Thanks very much. Questions of staff? Councillor Moyse, questions of staff.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Speaker, or Chair. What kind of consultation did you undertake with frontline staff around their safety? And what safety measures currently exist for staff?
Through the chair to you, Councillor, thanks for the question. So there was some comprehensive engagement that happened with respect to the CAMH shelter study in the first place. You know, focus groups, individual surveys with shelter workers. What we've done with the Shelter Safety Action Plan is base it on the recommendations from the CAMH shelter study. So engagement with our shelter providers through the Toronto Shelter Network happened. But it's going to be very important as we implement the action plan to continue that engagement through our joint occupational health and safety committees and staff planning.
But my question is specific to our staff, though. Did you consult with them, our shelter staff?
With our shelter staff through the CAMH shelter study, yes.
Okay.
Not so much in the development of the action plan, and I think there's some feedback that, you know, we could do better in that regard, and we're committed to doing so as we implement the plan.
And also, too, how do you ensure a trauma-informed response for staff?
So I think it's very important, and thanks for the question, is as we onboard many more people into this work, is that, you know, there's dedicated training that happens before they, you know, are put into the front lines and are delivering service. And it's important that that training is kept up to date over time as we go forward as well. So a trauma-informed focus is something that, you know, we're very focused on delivering for our frontline staff. And we may need to reassess some of the other standard training that they take so we can focus primarily on that trauma-informed approach.
Okay. And one final question. What steps are you taking or will take to implement this action plan in collaboration with frontline staff?
Yeah, through the chair to you, Councillor, I think it is through those channels that exist in the workplace, through our joint occupational health and safety committees. With Local 79, we have a quarterly Workplace Violence Committee. I think that would be a table that we could, engage in the implementation plan discussions as well, as well as through staff meetings and other venues available to us.
Okay. And to shift a little bit, so I'm happy to see that the churches are being reimbursed up to the end of 2023, but we saw what important role they played in actually helping us deal with, the crisis we're faced when it comes to underhoused people. And I think some are willing to continue the work if they continue to receive support from the city. So do you envision that going forward, that may be a partnership that we can continue to foster and help them to help our citizens?
Through the chair to you, Councillor, we're in touch with many of the groups that participated in 2023 and continue conversations in terms of the best way they can support still people who are arriving in Toronto with their settlement needs. And we're also looking to expand the number of smaller refugee house types of facilities that can be well integrated in the community and support people to get a good start as they arrive. So those conversations continue. We look for opportunities.
Because in your own report that was tabled earlier this year, it shows that even though we have increased our shelter beds, there's still a gap in that there's just still people who will not be housed every night. And we know this, but I haven't seen a plan to close that gap. And this is why I'm asking about the churches helping us to fill that gap. So again, do we have a plan in place to going forward to work with those churches? Because I don't see it here.
So through the chair, you Councillor, not in this report. I'd say those conversations continue. We've had some planning sessions with the refugee sector to see how we can build capacity to meet the various needs, and faith groups in the city play an important role. Our current plan with respect to closing that gap is our homeless services capital infrastructure strategy that will see 20 new shelters open in this city over the next 10 years, allowing us to close some of the bigger sites, and there could be opportunities in that work to support new shelter providers in the delivery of those services for either refugee claimants or non-refugee claimants.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? I have some questions. Just regarding the case management, or if we could get there, a care management approach to support people with complex needs who live outdoors. What are the services that are currently provided, and are these resources to match the existing needs? I mean, we'd love to be in a situation where shelter's provided to everyone who needs it, but some people need additional supports. And ideally, the shelter is a place where we connect people to those supports. And I'm thinking particularly around their health and meeting them in crisis. So what is existing right now that shelter staff and all the internal supports can connect to on the outside?
Yeah, so through you, Chair Bravo, beyond our Streets to Homes outreach teams that do street outreach, there are two programs that provide a specialized service. So one is our multidisciplinary outreach team. It's housed by Loft Community Services and supported by the Inner City Health Associates. So 2 psychiatrists, nursing staff, and 5 case managers that our outreach teams would refer people to for that specialized support. They visit encampments and other outdoor spaces to connect with people. So far this year, they've housed 29 individuals that have complex needs in supportive housing. The other team is a team that sits with the Inner City Health Associates, a mobile team promoting access to primary care led by a physician and 2 nurses, again, out in the encampments and other public spaces. And so those are the 2 groups we met with over the course of this summer to evaluate if they have the resources they need to continue that work, we're satisfied currently that they do, but that's an ongoing conversation with them in terms of the supports that they need.
My question is, so there are situations in which the care that we can provide within shelters goes into healthcare. What does that exist on the outside? Do you find situations in which, for example, a person who is no longer safe to stay in the shelter and needs supports for whatever situation they're in, what's out there for them right now? What I'm concerned about does the caseworker on the shelter side have a caseworker to match with on the healthcare side, which is not a municipal responsibility, but is still needed?
Yeah, through you, Chair Bravo, no. I mean, frankly, there's still big gaps in the healthcare system with respect to places where someone could go that's an immediate crisis, whether it might be a safe bed or some other location where they could seek some respite outside of the shelter system or outside or off the street. And so there's certainly more investments that are needed in those services. And
I'm thinking, the deputants highlighted, and I think we're all very concerned about the ongoing impact of on the city and on our residents, particularly within the shelter system and those who are currently not housed within the shelter system but are unhoused, are not sheltered under the shelter system, of the Ontario government's forced closure of supervised consumption services, and the failure to deliver on immediately in the interim on the promises that they've made about additional mental health and addictions treatment services. Like, what do you? How critical is this to us right now? What do you foresee coming? I know we've had in other municipalities a lot of pressure on in a lot of other associated systems like emergency medical services and yeah.
So through you, Chair Bravo, we're very concerned about the changes and the legislation that will close life-saving services for people that use substances in the city. We've yet to see what new heart hubs will be and where they will be located, how they will operate, and what the scope of services they will provide. If these life-saving services are not available in the healthcare system, we fear more people will move outdoors into public spaces to use substances and be at greater risk for overdose and death.
Yeah, and of course, they've prohibited the harm reduction pieces, which we need. So in relation to what's before us, can you describe in more detail how the learnings and the research that's been done, the speaking to staff and residents, and how's this going to inform the plan around infrastructure building and the development of the 20 new shelters and those shelters that are immediately being announced in the immediate future of 6 new shelters in the short term? How will these be integrated into the implementation of the plan?
So through you, Chair Bravo, we have developed shelter design guidelines that will dictate how we build these new facilities, and so capital infrastructure will be designed with safety in mind. We'll be building smaller shelters that will integrate in a better way into communities. They'll have community spaces within them to embrace members of local neighborhoods that want to get involved in the delivery of services and understanding what happens within a shelter and who is there. And so it provides us a great opportunity to move away from some of the larger shelter hotels that we brought on over the course of the pandemic and build out these assets in communities right across the city of Toronto.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Fletcher? Oh, okay. All right, now we're going to speakers on this item. Councillor Moise.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank staff for this report and the work that goes into it. But I also want to thank our frontline staff who are doing the heavy lifting. This is not easy work at all. And I do hope that we continue to engage our frontline staff and support them so that they could, do the work well. But I recognize they too need support, and there's a lot of trauma involved in this work, regarding our staff. So just be mindful of that. We're still coming off of COVID. There's a lot of stresses in, just in general, in all departments. I experienced it in public health as well. I'm sure you experienced it here in shelter support services and in other city departments. So just is our job as, elected officials, as senior team, to make sure that our people are taken care of. In regards to the churches, again, I've had the opportunity to speak to many of them, and they were happy to step forward and assist where needed. But it was difficult, right? We actually they had to kind of twist our arm and kind of embarrass us at some points. And then we came after the fact to kind of reimburse and backtrack and apologize and all these other things. But there's a willingness on their parts to continue to assist us in this work. And I think we have to proactively engage them and ask them what we can do for them to help them do this work as well. Because I feel that we do need them. It's a partnership. So I just encourage staff to continue the dialogue. And thank you for this report, and I'll keep an eye on it.
Thank you, Councillor. I also would like to, first of all, thank all the deputants that joined us today. Those who challenge us to do more. I want to start by recognizing that we know that not enough is being done, and that we're here because we don't have the housing that meets the needs that people have and housing that people can afford. And this is the original problem here. The shelter system is intended to be a step into a home, a transition. It's a place that should be the backup, not the default. And while we want to make them better, it's horrifying to see what's happening, not just in the city, but across this country. There's no community that is untouched by this problem, no matter how small. There are communities of 10,000 people with hundreds of people who are currently unhoused. And so, of course, the scale of the challenge is significant here in the city of Toronto, which has by far the largest shelter system in the entire country. I want to recognize the leadership of the shelter division and the boldness of contracting and making the relationship with CAMH to look at the problem. The dual problem, the safety of residents and the safety and the conditions of residents and the safety and conditions of the workers. The prevalence of abuse or even violence that is particularly directed at racialized people, Indigenous people, Black people, and people who are LGBTQ plus is something that we really need to think about. Care work in general is hugely under stress in the city of Toronto and in this country, whether it's in childcare or elder care, and certainly in caring within the shelter system. So it's really important that we attend to this, that there's continual conversations with the workers on the front lines, and with the residents in the shelters who understand the situation well and need to be part of the solution. There's a lot going on in this report. It just shows the range of work that this division does. We're talking about shelter safety, support for refugee claimants, outreach for people living outside in encampments, and so much more. I think that it's indicative of how this is, to me, the biggest human emergency that we're facing in the city of Toronto, and we need to treat it that way. I think it's really crucial to, and it's appreciated for people to come here and say that we need to adopt this plan. We need to stick to it because we do need to build out the shelter system in a way that's responsive to people's needs. So I hear from people who say, and including in my ward, you know, shelters are unsafe, I don't want them in my neighborhood, or, but at the same time, I don't want an encampment in my neighborhood. And I think that we have to remember that we have an obligation to people to bring them inside and to give them the supports that they need. The idea of it's an indivisible idea that we make shelters safer for people, whether workers or residents. That's community safety. That's a massive intervention in community safety that people deserve. We need to build out this capital plan. You know, we need to make sure that the first 6 shelters that are proposed are underway, are built with supportive community so that we can have the embrace that one of the deputants talked about. These are our neighbors, and I view the people who will occupy any future shelter as constituents of ours, that need the attention that any other constituent might need. And I think that when we are united in that view, then we can have a more credible voice in relation to the provincial and federal governments who need to step forward on the housing side, on the supportive housing side, on the healthcare side, and on the income side, because you know we have a lot of people who are unable to afford a place to live on social assistance or on ODSP, and people that are working who can't afford a place to live, and at the same time. You know, we need to be united in that call. So I congratulate the staff for the report. I appreciate the calls from the members of the public and advocates to do more, because we have to continue to challenge ourselves to do that, while saying that I know that this isn't enough to solve the problem. I do think that we're making important strides here that are based in care, are based in understanding that people have inherent rights and value no matter who they are, where and whether they have a home or not. And that we're going to continue to strive to meet the needs that people have, meet them where they are, and provide the supports that they require. So thanks. Any other speakers? No. On the item, all in favor? That is carried.
Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also follow us on social media. And for more information, check out our website.